be jumping into a little Ben Shabibo. Ben Shabibo. Appreciate that. I'm actually about to head to Brooklyn soon, so I feel you on that. I gotta watch the end of Supernatural with a friend of mine. Gotta. But yeah, let's party. So if you don't know, Ben Shapiro is the head of the Conservative Outlook Outreach Talking Heads. He's the final boss. After you get past people like Jim Jordan, Peterson, Candace Owens, and the like, and Tim Pool and them, you gotta get to the big boss, final boss, Ben Shabibo. So I'm gonna spend a little bit of today. I'm gonna go through a little bit of the Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens dynamic, and hopefully we can stay on topic so I don't kill myself trying to poison myself with all of their nasty, absolute horrible rhetoric. Absolute horrible rhetoric, but we'll see what happens.
Have become an angry reflection of a divided country. On this night, police and protesters are out in force at the University of Utah. All because of this baby-faced 33-year-old father of two.
I mean, let's be real about this. Look at me. I mean, do I look like a physical threat to anybody?
Oh my God! It's like the memes just make themselves. Oh my God, the memes make themselves, yo. I would make so much money if I could just can I just get him in a boxing ring, yo? He's already pissing me off, and I had just started this video.
Seem like a physical threat to anybody? Last time I was in a fight, I was 14 years old. I was 2 years younger than everybody else in my high school class, and I was getting my ass kicked.
Ben Shapiro is editor-in-chief of the conservative Daily Wire and host.
Also known as the Daily Wire, that absolutely propped up the claim that one, there was election fraud, two, Antifa was hiding in some plane or something that Tim Pool grabbed onto. Oh, I saw black-cladded people. It was absolutely Antifa soldiers getting on the planes. All right, we could really spend hours talking about Ben Shapiro and his little weird obsession with getting owned in public. But besides that and his little rat face, we will dive into what he thinks.
Is that good for America or just good for President Trump?
He's now at the center of a nationwide debate about whether conservative voices are being stifled by protesters. On American College February at the University of Berkeley, former Breitbart commentator Milo Yiannopoulos shut down after protesters threw rocks and Molotov cocktails. And just last month, when Ben Shapiro spoke at the University of Berkeley, local authorities spent more than $500,000 on security.
It's amazing they had to essentially lock that place down for you.
And the headlines were nuts. I mean, the headlines Berkeley braces for Shapiro visit. Really? Was I the one who's going to be smashing ATMs?
Okay, so point one. What I love the most about trying to get inside of the heads of these conservative folks is this whole rhetoric where they believe they're the innocent ones. Their mere presence causes disruption, and that is because people can't handle what they have to say. Not that it's poison, not that it's evil, not that it's directly intertwined with all of what we consider to be just outdated, unfashionable ideas. But instead what we get is this nasty breeding of conservative ideals that do nothing but hinder certain groups of people from making progress in society. This is obvious. Anybody with anybody who went through high school can figure out that in the world that we live in right now, conservative ideals don't fit into the mainstream, political and socioeconomic structure of how we live. The money's not there, the figures aren't there. The only people who still attach on to conservative old ideals are people who make money from them. That's just a fact. That's just a fact, because if you listen to both sides of the argument, you generally end up on either side of this, unless you're a socialist or you're a fascist. And I'm going to have to say it. Sadly, right-wing people are starting to toil into the idea of fascism as being okay, as long as we stick it to the libs. So far be it from me to be the voice of neglectful reason here, but I have to be honest in what I say and what I believe. Like, I can't fathom a world in which we're still judging people based on their sex, their gender, and they'll say this all the time. I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but you're perpetuating that stereotype, you're perpetuating that socioeconomic dynamic that you still want to hold people down, because the more people that get inside of the influx of money and politics and just ways of life generally exclude you from being able to have a voice. So by nature, you will naturally die out. Sorry that it has to be that way. Sorry you didn't join the winning team. Sorry you're not on the train. But there's better ways to go about it than to assume that you are a victim somehow because you speak in some conservative right-wing echo chamber and you push these ideals out into the world that literally cause people, if you didn't know already, Ben Shapiro was the whole reason why a terrorist shot up a damn, I don't want to say this wrong because we can look that up. Oh, no. Yeah, here it is. I didn't incite the mock shooter, conservative pundit Ben Shapiro insists. Even though the guy literally was found with more than enough inspirations from his own manifesto that, yeah, there it is. How many times or how many things did he read or watch? And who's at the top? 93. Who's at the top? Tucker Carlson, John Nolt, like Richard Spencer, Ann Coulter, Alex Jones, Kellyanne Conway, Laura Ingraham, Breitbart, alt-right, Trump Press, Stephen Bannon, all these people that have been literally slammed ever since they started like popping up. There's a reason for that. And he's denying it because I never gave him the rhetoric to say go out and do that, but you helped fuel it. It reminds me of that scene in I don't know if I'm allowed to show that, but I'll show it anyway. No. Yeah. So I'm going to use this as an example. And I want you to pay attention to it. Oh, God, it's not going to do it. Now it's not going to do it. So we'll just watch it like this.
There are illegal immigrants pouring into this country every day, and any one of them could be a super terrorist.
Many are calling for more superheroes in order to counter the super terrorist threat and protect Americans.
What is our government doing about this?
Thanks.
All of us.
Have a good day, hon.
Stand up right now. I am sick of waiting for some executive to finish his racket.
We are going to hold hearings on bought and
It's 1:45.
I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. I'm going to tell you something that the government doesn't want you to.
And they want more super terrorists.
Actually, people are pointing out that the rush to judgment by the left.
Victoria Nuland's accusation.
No offense. I get you.
Have a good day, hon.
But why does it matter what some super villain loving snowflake has? Every minute we waste. One super terrorist has already got through. More will come.
It's 1:45.
And I mean, for all we know, these maniacs could have already flown over our borders and be standing
You all right,
next
pal?
to you right now, just waiting for their chance to kill us all. Keep America safe again. And I am so glad that I was there this time. What about
Echo chambers.
I am counting on you.
Have a good day, hon.
Every minute we wait. No, it's up to us. We have to make our voices heard. That is why. There's a list. Let's show Bob the list.
I can't show the end of the scene,
to show
but
us the way. Don't let me down.
I saw the light in your eyes. Just take the money. You one of them? You fucking supervillain? What?
Are you bulletproof, motherfucker?
Oh, please, I have a family, please.
Damn, TOS. But yeah, like, that's how it builds. So no, you're not directly responsible for it, but you push these conservative ideals outside into the world, and it fuels people's hatred because they don't understand anybody. You don't talk about compassion. You don't talk about the energy of love and wanting to be a better populace. You just talk because you like hearing yourself talk, and we got to call them out for what it is. So that's Ben Shapiro.
Just 3 hours before he's supposed to take the stage at 7 o'clock here in Utah, Shapiro says there are reports of possible violence.
I'm hearing some rumors that there may be some people who try to bring weapons tonight, which would just be ridiculous and awful. I don't want to be getting killed at my lectures.
A fellow conservative podcast host claims he's captured this undercover video of self-described Antifa members allegedly handing out knives and talking about luring fans of Ben Shapiro to their car where they allegedly had guns.
I mean, this is insanity.
Shapiro says this all speaks to a liberal hysteria on American campuses.
No, they're scared because they know what you bring. It's the alt-right march. Like, they know. They know that when we invite you in to talk in these spaces, and you bring more and more people who will agree with that, and they might take it a step further. So we're just going to push you out and not worry about this at all. But instead, no, it's our fault. It's our fault for even caring about the dynamic of what you say. I'm sorry that it has to be said in such plain English. I'd love to give you the political science version of this, but the plain English version is, I'm not going to let you into the bar because even though you are nice and have a family, I let you in and 5 other of you come in. And one of those 5 going to shoot up my bar. So just nip it in the bud when it counts.
So your view is this is political correctness run amok?
Yeah, I mean, it's the furthest extension of political correctness. And when you say something that it's not just me disagreeing with you, it is me destroying your identity as a human being in a way that is akin to violence.
Let me just read you from the statement that the folks who want to shut you down put out. They said, Ben Shapiro has openly called transgender people mentally ill. He portrays the great gay rights movement as a conspiracy to root out God-based institutions. He has recently defended conversion therapy, which is nothing short of abuse.
Okay, so there are a bunch of things that are just not true there. I am unaware of any time that I have ever defended conversion therapy as such, said that it's a...
If I Google this, sorry, I can't spell today.
I would have to change who I am to be a...
No.
Not a conversion. It's not a conversion. Okay, you are what you are. Unlike sexual orientation, where your feelings are the actual thing at issue, when it comes to gender identity, what is at issue is that your feelings are at odds with your actual...
Today's gonna be that day. Until I get my mic fixed, I gotta stretch over. So it's like I gotta reach for the letters.
Right? This is a very different thing. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not the same in a variety of... Right? This is a very different thing. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not the same in a variety of ways, including the fact that gender identity is inextricably connected with your biology, and your biology is reflected in your gender identity. And
wrong.
Pretending that when the two are at odds, that this is not a big problem is ridiculous.
Pretending. He's literally like saying everybody who's transgender of any kind, trans people in general, are all pretending. That's his MO. That's his take. That's his take. But I could have sworn I just heard, even though, be granted, it's 2 years before, you would think that somebody of as high stature as Ben would be consistent. And I think I spoke about this earlier. Conservatives don't have consistency. And when you dive into it, it's like, who would follow this?
Effective, because I don't see the evidence that it's effective.
What about this idea that you call transgender people mentally ill?
I do say that transgenderism is a mental illness because it's gender dysphoria. It's a psychological disorder. So That's not an insult to people who suffer from psychological disorders. You are not doing a service to people who are suffering from a mental disorder to humor them by suggesting that their mental disorder is reflected in objective reality.
It is important to note that the American Psychological Association does not define being transgender as a mental illness. A gender dysphoria diagnosis only applies if an individual experiences significant distress.
It's actually a natural phenomenon, and they're committing suicide because they're depressed, because people are mistreating them.
Then I'm not for mistreatment, but I don't think that me suggesting
I'm not for mistreatment, but I am suggesting
that you're not a woman is mistreatment of you.
Whether or not you agree with Shapiro, whether or not you think he's engaged in hate speech, there is little doubt that his speech is protected by the First Amendment.
They won't let a Jewish guy come to a college campus and say what he wants to say. That's where we're at in America. That's ridiculous.
At just past 6 o'clock.
Yeah, wait till they let you try to talk about something and see what ends up happening.
And with the protests heating up, Professor David Vergobi, who teaches a class on freedom of expression here, tells us that many college students today do not understand that speech is protected unless it directly incites violence.
This is a public institution. It's a government entity. They have to guarantee the free speech rights of everyone, including Shapiro.
We find the leader of that group
Again, we're not silencing him. I hate this idea that conservatives think they're getting silenced. That's not happening. What's happening is that people are not allowing you the freedom to speak wherever you want because they don't want to hear it. Your speech has direct consequences towards how people view other marginalized groups inside of their own communities. If I keep letting you speak there, I eventually am going to allow you to grow an audience that just doesn't like me because of my skin color, because of my gender identity, because of all these other factors that I can't control because I just want to be my own person. So that leads me in to think, what the hell, what are you talking about? Like, what did you expect? Freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequences.
Vowed to shut tonight's event down, who makes a startling admission.
I don't think he should speak.
But that doesn't really comport with the First Amendment.
I don't care.
You don't care?
I don't care.
It's at that point, yeah, I don't care.
I think that's a relevant document right now.
The Constitution is not a relevant document?
All right. Understandably, liberals are fucking weird. Liberals like that are weird because they'll say shit like that out of their mouths, and then when they get confronted with the problem, all of a sudden it's like I said that, but that's only because I disagree with him. I feel like what could have been said right then and there is the Constitution is not a relevant document in regards to what this man promotes. As much as I would love him to have free speech, and I would defend that right for anybody, that man is specifically going to talk about this thing in a way that will critically alter the way people who listen to him and believe in him think about what he's saying in a light that won't include inclusivity. It's not hard to figure that out. I know it sounds like a reach. But it's not, because we've seen it. In hindsight, 3 years ago, this might have not been my opinion on it. But watching him literally go from this to this, come on, man. Come on. I'm going to use the Joe Biden line. The thing. Come on, man. Bunch of malarkey.
Increasingly violent protests against conservative speakers on campus. By shortly after 7 p.m. here at the University of Utah, Ben Shapiro is backstage ready to go on after his security team sneaked him into the building. One irony is that while he's hated by many on the left, he's also hated by the self-described alt-right.
I've been very, very outspoken against the alt-right. I've said the alt-right is a garbage movement composed of garbage ideas, that it has nothing to do with constitutional conservatism.
Shapiro is also fiercely critical of Donald Trump, and he publicly...
Lies. Yeah, see what I mean? It's like they literally don't even attach themselves to morals that they had a year ago, 2 years ago. It's grifting. I'm going to get as much money as I can making people believe everything that I want to believe. Man, I'm about to go into rapid speak. So if you can't follow, I apologize. But there's this entire thing about how conservatives seem to spill out into all the dynamics of whatever is the most popular opposite topic of whatever the mainstream wants to talk about. So if it's inclusivity, it's not allowing inclusivity. If it's gender identity, it's thinking of gender identity and dysphoria as a mental illness. It's going against the grain of everything that we wish to progress with in society in a form or manner to allow a group of people that listen to, feel you, understand you, to generally pull together and say, all right, they're just crazy. And I hate it. I hate it because it doesn't fit into there's the word, paradigm of how society is growing. And I feel like they know that. They know that they're literally leaking. And there's nothing else they could do about it, but grifter's gonna grift.
Quit his last job at Breitbart News when a female colleague was allegedly manhandled by Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, and Shapiro thought Breitbart failed to have her back.
And I quit under very public circumstances because Breitbart had been turning itself into a Trump propaganda arm, and the alt-right really liked President Trump, or then candidate Trump.
What kind of blowback have you received?
Well, I mean, aside from the 7,400 odd anti-Semitic tweets that I received from...
Look at that, see? I'm a victim. Because everything is about you being Jewish and not about you being a pipsqueak dork.
March to November of last year. Death threats in the mail, death threats on my phone, death threats at my business phone.
Which is why Shapiro finds it hard to believe that protesters call him a white supremacist.
That is the stupidest thing I have legitimately ever heard. I keep hearing this, and I keep wondering, was it the yarmulke that gave it away?
Shapiro has been interested in politics for as long...
Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man.
Yesterday, this all culminated in media members doing what media members do. So instead of saying, okay, we'd like to see the evidence. Can we see the evidence? Instead of saying, let's let the process play out, which is what I'm saying, it's what Tucker's saying, we're all saying the same thing.
Let's let the process play out. You see it? Yeah. It took me, how long? 5 minutes to find him a hypocritical son of a... And all of a sudden, he with brevity, with his chest, he says this nasty shit that goes against what he just finished saying in one interview a while ago.
Everyone's saying this. Instead of that, your mainstream media members decided it's time to yell at people, right? That's really what's important. So Mike Pence was doing a presser on COVID-19, which, by the way, some good news. Pfizer has now requested emergency authorization to start distributing its vaccine by the end of this month, which is actually real good news, right? So Pence does a presser, and the media members lose their bleep, right? As Pence is walking off, it just shows you what journalism has basically become, which is performative nonsense for the cameras. So Pence didn't take questions. He's walking off, and media members just start shouting at the top of their lungs at him. And they know he's leaving, right? He's not turning around. He's not answering the questions. It's just if I'm caught on camera shouting at him, then I get my scene in the movie to be made about the evils of the Trump administration backlit and with an upshot to show my heroism.
Oh, my God. It's so easy. It's so easy. So everybody that yells at Trump, especially with somebody, are you being a sore loser? Everybody that yells at Trump is all of a sudden like trying to get a movie shot. What is it with conservatives and attaching like their love for movies on top of everything? Like, why do you think we want fame and not just the removal of fascism in our government? Beyond me. Beyond me how much we stick to, or how much they stick to, I should say, these strange-ass parallels that are very hard to defeat, because if you tried to think about them, you would say, well, that's nonsense. I'm not going to sit here and debate with you on a topic that has nothing to do with anything. And while you might say, well, that's just a point of view that they're trying to bring, at the same time, is it really? Is it really?
Media members just yelling at Mike Pence randomly about what's going on with the election.
Thank you.
All of you need to answer this. Why is the federal government...
What is going on?
You're not working with the
transition. You're all part of not recognizing democracy. You're all undermining the democratic election.
It's about damn time somebody said that. What are you talking about, unhinged journalists? We've been screaming at it. The same thing happens every time, and once they leave, it gets quiet. But it's about time somebody said out loud what's going on, and like all of a sudden that's a bad thing? Because they want their 15 minutes of fame? People on the street are screaming this. What is wrong with this man?
Every one of you.
Why is the federal
And you won't
government
work with the
refusing-
transition.
So, is that like a good thing? Honestly, there is another point to be made here in all of this, regardless of what the allegations end up being or what evidence it ends up showing. There is a systemic distrust of the system that is now set in for tens of millions of Americans, tens of millions of them, who say that they don't trust election outcomes. This is true right and left. They don't know who to trust when it comes to this stuff because it seems like nobody is telling them the truth. And that is because they believe that everybody is badly motivated. And in a lot of cases, they are right. You know, when Trump supporters look at the journalistic entities who are saying, just dismissing out of hand Giuliani's claims or Powell's claims, when they see that, and these people are not saying, okay, we need to see the evidence, they're just immediately dismissing it. Or when they say voter fraud has never happened anywhere. Or when they say that the polls are absolutely correct. Or when they say it's clear that Russian collusion happened. Trump voters are going to respond by saying, we're not going to listen to anything that you have to say. Scorn does breed retaliatory scorn and distrust. Okay, that is just the way that human beings behave. And there's a reason for that. So it does make a difference. It does make a difference when you have columns like one from Wajahat Ali in the New York Times suggesting that reaching out to Trump supporters is a bad idea. He has an entire article in the New York Times yesterday in which he talks about how he, after 2016, decided he was going to travel the country and talk to Trump supporters. But his entire article is about how he went around, he talked to Trump supporters, and they didn't change their minds. And therefore, they are bad and terrible and horrible and racist.
Wait. This is my specialty. Ladies and gentlemen, lock yourselves in. Here comes the paradigm shift. Trump supporters generally are racist, unabated, and unallowed to change because they agree with his ideals about what America should be. Not Republican, not GOP, not the rest of the board, just Trump and his enablers. If I can't convince Trump supporters to see beyond the light, that I'm trying to turn Trump supporters back into Republicans. Trumpism is different than Republicanism. And until pundits like this finally get that through their heads, we're going to be in a standstill. So I'm not going to sit here and say all Trump supporters are racist, but you allow racism to take a part in what you believe. Oh, I like that guy because of policy. I don't really care what he says about, like, black people. Cool, but I do. So now you don't care about the part that affects me, you only care about the part that affects you. And that's what makes you kind of like judgmentally racist. Because I can then astute a point in which I believe if anything were to happen between us, you're dipping out for the guy who would say at some point, kill all the blacks. While I'm sitting here saying both of us should be on the same page. So what are we going to agree on? Where do you fit in the shifting of society? Because if you're willing to let this man be the be-all, end-all of, yeah, that's my guy. That's the guy. That's my favorite person in the entire world. Then how do I find common ground with you? I've talked about this before, and I'll mention it here. But common ground when it comes to political conversations or socioeconomic conversations generally has to come to an understanding that both sides have a reasonable argument that deserves to find a middle point. If I say I don't like chocolate ice cream and you say you don't like vanilla, I could find a middle point with you and say, damn, Metropolitan slaps though. I'll eat the vanilla in there because it's paired with the strawberry and I can just chew out on the chocolate. If you say you like Mexican food and I say I like Ecuadorian food, we both eating rice and beans. I could find a middle point here. There is no middle point between Trumpism and reality because I have to honor your speaking points, your talking points, your ideas, your thoughts, your mentions, your theories as actual fact, or at least reasonable enough for me to be able to sit there and debate them with you. And I hate doing that. Everyone hates doing that. So yeah, you're going to get lumped in as a useless piece of coal in society and we got to burn you. Like, we got what is your energy good for if it's just to stand everything still and say the rise of the Fourth Reich is coming and that's all it is? Like,
he says this, in Ohio, I spent 90 minutes on a drive to the airport with a retired Trump supporter. We were cordial to each other. We made jokes. We shared stories about our families. Neither of us changed our outlook. They'll never take my guns, ever, he told me, explaining his Facebook feed was filled with...
Right there. They'll never take my... Nobody's taking your guns. Biden's there. No mention on taking your guns. Nobody's touching the Second Amendment. See? In order to honor your ideals, I have to be... In order to put your ideals on a shelf in the marketplace of ideas, I have to believe that something you're saying is founded in some type of reality, which it is not.
Articles about how Hillary Clinton and Democrats would kill the Second Amendment and steal his guns. Although he didn't like some of Mr. Trump's tones and comments, he didn't believe he was a racist in his heart. I'm not a cardiologist, so I wasn't qualified to challenge that. He says, I did my part. What was my reward? Listening to Mr. Trump's base chant, send her back. We cannot help people who refuse to help themselves. Mr. Trump is an extension of their id, their culture, their values, their greed. He is their defender and savior. He is their blunt instrument. He is their destructive drug of choice. The truest thing Trump has ever said is they don't hate him. They don't hate you because they hate him. They hate him because they hate you. And so people respond to the media simply dismissing all claims out of hand with regard to Trump and the election. They regard that as just an extension of the media's scorn for them. And honestly, it's hard to blame people for that. It may not be correct, but it's certainly justifiable. I mean, when you see the way that Democrats on Twitter react to Trump supporters, it's insane.
All right. I promise you the example he's going to give is going to be hyperbole. I promise you it's going to be this far-reaching, obvious response to how nuts you sound, and he's going to ground it in some form of his own reality.
For example, a California Democratic regional director tweeted out this. No, seriously, how do you deprogram 75 million people? Where do you start? Fox? Facebook? We have to start thinking in terms of post-World War II Germany or Japan, or the failures of Reconstruction in the South.
Wait, that's a great question. How do you deprogram 75 million people to stop believing in the Trump-pushed rhetoric about taking your guns, QAnon, all the conspiracy theories that he's spoken out about? How do you deprogram all those people? Do you tell Fox to start saying, okay, these things were fake? Do you start pushing more things out on Facebook? Like, hey, these things have actually been fact-checked and properly researched. Do you silence them? Do you erase them off this is an actual talk that we have to have. We have to start thinking in terms of post-World War II Germany and Japan, or the failures of Reconstruction in the South. Post-World War II Germany or Japan, feudal and fascist societies that are entirely filled with people who probably supported what happened in their darkest moments. This is not hard to figure out. This is not hard to gather. It takes a matter of understanding, what are we going to do with the people who are there? How do you deprogram them? There were people that were very fond of Hitler. How do you tell them, okay, that they were absolutely bad and you shouldn't believe in them anymore? What ended up happening in post-World War II Germany and Japan? People still followed through with these mandates that were given by their now defunct and dead leaders. How do you get people to turn off the switch and say, all right, yeah, that was a bad idea. Maybe we shouldn't have followed through with that. That's a fair question. That's a great question. Or the failures of Reconstruction in the South, which led to Jim Crow. Many people still, even though they lost the war in slavery, still believe slaves were a deserved part of this country. How do you deprogram that? I don't see an issue with this. I promise you he's going to warp an issue into it.
Yeah, that's crazy. He says, this is not your standard partisan policy disagreement. This is a conspiracy theory-fueled, belligerent death cult against reality and basic decency.
I predicted it again. I got to stop doing that. I got to just let the video play out. But yeah. It is. I just said that. The only actual policy debates of note are happening within the Dem coalition between left and center left. Yeah. Yeah, because the right is enabling Trump to throw the election all up in the air. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Come on, man. Come on. I sound like Chris Tucker. Come on, man.
See, the only actual policy debate of note are happening within the Democratic coalition between the left and the center-left. Right? This is what Democrats think of you. He says, I know conservatives are upset by some of the responses here, and yeah, many are out of line. But what do you expect people to do in self-preservation? The right has been running 4 years on bleep your feelings, my conspiracy theories are valid opinions, and we have more guns.
Literally. Literally, the right has been running on this. You, Ben Shapiro, your still pinned tweet is facts don't care about your feelings. Like, oh, Trump 2020, Trump 2016, F your feelings. My conspiracy theories are valid. Yeah, QAnon is a huge fueling part of that base, more than they're willing to admit. And we have more guns. Oh, if Antifa ever shows up in my house, I'm gonna shoot them right through the door with my AR. I'm gonna teach them something about respecting this country. And I'm supposed to do what here? Disagree with that?
Well, no. The right has been acknowledging that the left has cultural scorn for them, and that is going to breed retaliatory scorn.
So, wait. So you hated Obama and the left was cool. Trump got in, pushed all the rhetoric, and now the left has scorn for the right, and the right is responding, not as though they were the aggressors that literally caused the things that you're saying right now? Do you think it was leftist Twitter that came up with the idea that they're going to steal your Second Amendment? The whole idea of we have more guns is because they think the left doesn't believe in gun ownership. No, it's just harder for minorities, well, let's be honest, black people, to get guns, like, legally. And then we get chastised for having guns. Why is there so much gun violence? It's not hard. None of this is difficult. They make it difficult. They want to make it difficult because that's how they live. That's how they breed. That's how they feel. And I hate it. I hate it so much because on any given day, on any given front, we could talk about this as though it was some nutcase that just got to speak on YouTube and get 261,000 views and still not understand how he's exposing his own audience to this idea that the right are victims and the left are a bunch of bullies.
It's going to breed
You have the presidency. Shut up. You have the Senate. Shut up.
Level of distrust that is endemic.
You have the Supreme Court. Shut up.
The system. And every time you tweet crap like this, you are creating more distrust in the systems that are required. Right? When you declare that Barack Obama is the arbiter of truth, and then everybody says, okay, well, I don't trust you anymore. What do you think is going to happen?
When did we say Barack Obama was the arbiter of truth? He's got swag, he's got charisma, but he also bombed a lot of innocent people on his watch. Like, come on. Come on, we can be critical of people and not hate them. It's being critical of people who throw hate at you that's weird and makes us retaliate even further.
Joyce Carol Oates, who is another writer, famous writer, and a far lefty, who tweets out pictures of her weird feet. That is a thing. She tweeted out the other day, for many pro-Trump Americans, and she bleeps out Trump because it's a bad word. For many pro-Trump Americans, the pandemic is like the Holocaust to many Germans. They knew what was happening, but adjusted to living with it in indifference or, in some cases, profiting from it. Only if affected personally do people seem to care.
Literal facts. Literal facts. Literal facts. That's why red states are spiking up super high, and that's why blue states are generally keeping it low, even though they're still seeing spikes.
Right, so if you are a Trump supporter and you are disagreeing with Joyce Carol Oates on COVID response, it's because you're like a German ignoring the Holocaust.
Yeah. You're ignoring a plight to care for your fellow citizen because it doesn't affect you. You're ignoring a plight because you believe Donald Trump's words on how COVID's not that bad and you can beat it. You're ignoring the evidence that we were packing bodies in freezer trucks, acting as morgues. You're ignoring all this evidence and pushing for the reopening. Jim Jordan's tweet literally disproves this. And oh my God, they don't even have a consistency. We could drag it all the way back down to consistency. They're not even consistent in their own arguments.
And then we're expected to trust these people? We're expected to trust that they have a good-hearted search for truth at heart? I think not. That is what is driving a lot of this. Yeah, I've been saying on a wide variety of issues, there should be bipartisan agreement on how we handle a lot of these issues. When it comes to voter fraud, evidence, right? Evidence of voter fraud. When it comes to COVID policy, follow the evidence. Don't make it up. Don't follow political incentives. Follow the evidence. When it comes to racism in America, follow the evidence. Right? It's all the same.
Follow the evidence. Yeah, bro, I've got absolute proof that I was called the N-word at 2 weddings. I know that doesn't really matter to you because you don't know who I am, but it's more prevalent, and I'm not going to sit there and write them all down and give you the times and dates so that way you can feel more comfortable in believing that it either exists or don't. Sorry, I can't do that for you.
Standard. But when people pretend that they are arbiters of truth and they only examine evidence in cases they want to examine evidence, and then they sneer at people who disagree with them, the predictable result is that people are going to react by disregarding everything they have to say and saying, okay, you didn't require evidence for Stacey Abrams. You didn't require evidence for 4 years of Russian collusion bullcrappery. You didn't require 5 minutes of explanation of evidence for that sort of stuff. And we were put through 4 years of that. And now you expect me to respect your demands for evidence? I think not. Either there's going to be one standard or there's going to be no standard. There is not going to be a double standard for most Americans. Either evidence is required for claims or evidence is not required for claims. So pick a side. Are you on the evidence side or are you on the not evidence side? Right? That is the real question, and that's true for everything. It's true for everything, from COVID policy to election fraud to race policy. Whatever it is, require evidence for claims. That is the side of truth, is the side that cares about evidence. Did you know?
Liar. Like, at this point now, I'm just calling you a liar. But on his idea about sowing doubt,
5 years ago, I made a video for a channel called Computerphile about why electronic voting is a bad idea.
Let's
and
talk
I still
about
get
this.
emails occasionally asking things.
Let's actually have a conversation on what you can do in an election.
Just around the corner. No, it's really not. Here is why electronic voting is still a bad idea. Elections have some very unusual requirements. There are 2 key features that are almost opposed to each other: anonymity and trust. So first, your vote should be completely anonymous. There should be no way that anyone can find out who you voted for, even after everything's been counted. That way, no one can bribe you or threaten you to vote a particular way. In the UK, if you mark your ballot in a way that could potentially identify you, so if you sign it, for example, then that ballot is not counted. This is why election officials are worried about people taking selfies with their ballots, because you should not be able to prove how you voted afterwards. Otherwise, you can have a tax like $10 off for blue voters, or entry to this party only for yellow voters, or vote red or you'll regret it. Votes have to be anonymous. The second requirement is absolute transparent trust. The system needs to make sure that your vote is securely and accurately counted, sure, but it also needs to be obvious to everyone, no matter their technical knowledge, that the system can be trusted. So if you're using paper, you place your ballot in a sealed box that doesn't get unsealed until everyone with a stake in the election has someone representing them in the room. There should always be people from more than one side guarding it, or at the very least, witnessing that there's a tamper-proof seal being used for transport. Voters need to be able to trust that their vote will be counted, even though they'll never see it again and it can't be traced back to them. And at no point is a single person put in a position of trust. People can be corrupt or threatened or incompetent or all 3 at the same time. Now, physical voting is not perfect. It can be attacked. It has been attacked. The UK's own paper system doesn't fulfil both of those requirements perfectly. It is possible to identify voters from their ballots if a court orders it. And there are stories about that being done outside the law too. But the key point is not that paper voting is perfect. It isn't. But attacks against it don't scale well. Physical voting is centuries old, and in that time, almost every conceivable fraud on the system has been tried, and defences have been found. The more physical votes you need to change, the more people you need to influence, the more time and money it takes, and the less likely it is that your little conspiracy will stay secret. In a UK election, there are hundreds of polling stations across the country, with staff made up of scores of employees and thousands of volunteers. The job of changing a significant number of votes, enough to sway an election, becomes very, very difficult. People have attempted it. Some people have been convicted. A few have probably gotten away with it on some scale. Granny farming is the term that shady operatives use for going round all the retirement homes and getting vulnerable elderly people to sign a proxy vote, a paper saying that someone else can vote on their behalf. And yeah, on a small scale, that has worked. But once you start scaling up that attack, it becomes extremely difficult and time-consuming, and the chances are you're going to get found out. With electronic voting,
it's literally impossible.
that's not the case. So first, let's talk about electronic voting machines. That's where there's a computer at the polling station, so voters still go into a booth. It's just that they are pushing buttons or tapping things on a touchscreen, not writing on paper. Problem number one, trusting the software and the hardware. In theory, our voting computer could be running open source software where anyone can see and check the source code. In practice, that doesn't happen. It's probably going to be closed source. It's probably going to be loaded off an easily compromised USB stick on a computer that's been sitting unguarded and sometimes just idly and inexplicably connected to the internet for years. And those systems only ever get a full-scale test when an election actually takes place. That in itself should be enough to stop electronic voting ever being a thing. But okay, let's say that we do magically have the most stable, secure, open source software possible. How does a voter know and trust that that correct software is actually installed on the machine they're using?
They'd have to have an interface. They'd have to be educated. They'd have to know about computer science enough to be able to verify it. We'd have to have technicians like give courses on this, like this is what you should be looking for, this is what you, and then you'd have to trust those technicians. And it's not hard to do that. We literally have that with like Twitch and overlay systems, and we have this with open source video games and everything. Like, this is not a thing that we're uncomfortable in knowing. This is not a thing that we're unfamiliar with. But scaling that up to like everyone in America, and I'm just talking about America because I don't want to dab into other countries and their election systems because I'm not too well versed in that. But at the same time, the information is there. We just refuse to put money into it to educate a populace on very simple things. Because we feel like, oh, I gotta learn this, I gotta learn that. What happened to voting? I just want to write on a piece of paper. And so you continue to use these systems that are archaic because people trust them, even though those are easily compromisable. It's such a weird idea that we can't move past that to get us all on the same page, again, because we are not a society that thinks about each other. We're a society that thinks about ourselves.
Maybe we could use some sort of checksum or some other system to make sure the voting software is running correctly, but then you're just moving the problem. Now you have to trust that that checksum hasn't been forged, and almost no voters will actually understand what that check even means or why they should trust it. In the United States, voting machines are regularly tested every year at the voting village at DEF CON, one of the world's largest hacker conventions. It's not an official thing. Hackers there have managed to alter the stored vote tallies, change the ballots displayed to voters, and in one case have got a machine to run the video game Doom.
Because, you know, everything has to run Doom. Like, I'm still seeing people running Doom on a thermometer. Like, it's that bad.
Imagine if instead of a machine, there was just a person in the voting booth and you had to whisper your vote to them and they promised, oh, yes, you can absolutely trust them to accurately record your vote and pass it on to the people who are doing the count. No, you can't see how or where they're writing it down. You can't actually call and find out where they are or what they're doing, but they absolutely promise. It's basically what's happening with an electronic voting machine. You just have something that says, trust me, I've counted your vote and I've absolutely not been compromised, honest. Problem number 2 is votes in transit. How do you get the votes off that machine to the central counting place? There are 3 possible ways. One, you could take all the voting machines to the count. You could seal them all up and transport them physically from where the voting took place to where the counting takes place. No one does that. So you could download all the results from each machine onto a USB stick and take that. One bit of sleight of hand and you've got a completely different set of results. If you're about to propose some system where the results are checksummed and trusted, then please explain that to the average voter in a way they can understand and implicitly trust. Okay, so maybe we could transmit the votes electronically over the internet, which is optimistic. Man-in-the-middle attacks are more difficult now, but they're not impossible, particularly if you can't trust the software on either end.
Hold on, guys.
And now you are connecting.
Sorry, guys.
The voting machines directly to the internet, deliberately. Which brings us to problem number 3, the central counting server. Right at the end of the process, there is the server that tallies the votes and gives the final count, which has all the same problems with trust and verification as the individual voting machines, but now only a few people can even see that computer. That's also true about electronic counting machines, ones that take stacks of paper ballots and return totals. How do you trust they aren't quietly changing some votes? We live in a world where Volkswagen got away with specifically designing their cars to cheat on emissions tests for years. And that's before we include user error. In one Scottish election, trialling electronic voting, a result was corrected after one observer noticed it didn't make sense and stopped the announcement at the last minute. Turns out that someone forgot to scroll all the way to the right to read the columns on an Excel spreadsheet with the results in. And even if you can't compromise the election, you can still break trust. You can still cast doubt on a voting machine or the entire counting system just by leaving an unknown USB drive in it, taking a picture and posting it online, or just faking a photo of that. To break an electronic election, you don't actually need to break it. You just need to cast enough doubt on the result. It is a lot more difficult to do that with paper and physical ballot boxes. And all this is before we get to the really terrible idea that people should be able to use their phone or computer to vote from home. Now, I am sure that the device that you personally are watching this on is malware-free and up-to-date. Of course it is. But do you trust that for everyone in your family? For everyone on your street? The exact numbers differ depending on which security firm's figures you go with, but it's safe to say that a huge number of computers are infected with some sort of malware. Huge numbers of phones are on old, vulnerable versions of their operating systems. And that's just scammers setting up botnets and minor extortions. Imagine the sort of attack that could be put together by a small, well-funded team backed by a national government. That sort of attack would scale very, very well. Find the one hole in the system, and suddenly it costs roughly the same to change one vote as it does to alter millions. And your conspiracy stays very, very small indeed. Maybe you don't even have to set foot in the country whose elections you're hacking. Now, there are a couple of regular objections. I get to this. First of all, what about Estonia?
I love this.
Yes, in 2005, Estonia became the first country in the world to offer internet voting. First in local elections, then in national, then in European. In 2019, more than 40% of votes were cast online there, which is just short of 250,000 people. On the surface, the system seems robust. Voters can ID via their government-provided smart card or the SIM card on their phone. But there are problems. An independent report found gaps in the procedural and operational security. The architecture of the system is a decade old, and it's now dangerously out of date, and it's open to cyber attacks by foreign powers, either by exploiting individual phones or by breaking the trust in the server that counts the votes. The other common objection is, what about new technologies? What about blockchain? Look, leaving aside trying to explain blockchain to people and asking them to trust that this weird technology is worth using, it's basically just a write-only database. It doesn't solve the problem of trusting the software or hardware. It doesn't change how the voting machine works. The interface between the voter's intention and what's actually written to the database still has to work. If it prints a receipt of the vote that you can check later, well, it breaks anonymity. If it prints a receipt of seemingly random numbers that you can check later, it breaks trust because hardly anyone will understand what's actually going on there. I'm not saying there aren't advantages to electronic voting. Yeah, there are. Accessibility is the main one, and that's really important. In low-stakes elections, for small groups, for the little things, sure, go for it. But when the future of nations rests on the result, electronic voting is still a bad idea, and you should still vote against it while you can. I'm endorsing Dashlane.
So yeah, like it's such an easy thing to think about in regards to how we envision our world, because these things aren't new. It's the way we want them to occur that needs to change, because we all aren't on the same page about this. We all still have our own personal feelings about voting. We still all have our personal feelings about sowing doubt. So to go all the way back to Ben Shapiro and his dumbass, you want to think, how do you still have a voice? Why do you still want a voice in a world that doesn't fit your ideals? Just the majority of the people don't have the tolerance to let your ideas become in the marketplace of ideas if you're going to be spitting this horrible shit all the time.